Hi, this is Sniz, World 38, Lord of Ultima. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and cover the basic mechanics of resource production in relation to food and gold. I've got two different cities I've got queued up to cover this, and just my typical disclaimer, as with all my informal videos, this is one take, no rehearsal, barely any bullet points, so you get what you get, so bear with the ums and the ahs. Anyway, so let's cover food first. Now, in these videos, like I said, I'm going to cover some strategy stuff in some different videos, but for now, I'm just kind of making sure our newer members, newer players, understand the basic mechanics of how these buildings function and interact with one another. So let's cover food first. Food, unlike resource buildings, doesn't need as much in the way of boosters next to them. In fact, empty tiles, blank tiles, actually improve their bonuses. It's their natural resource for a farm. Farms produce food. So in this case, an empty tile is the booster. A cottage can also be a booster. And the mill, it's just called a regular mill, is what I would typically call the tier 2 booster, the super booster. So in this case, farms are a little... Oh, and also the water, lakes are also a super booster. So, and these two will interact with one another as well. So you get a lot of bang for your buck out of farms. In fact, farms will give you the highest production rate per building possible. So if later you want to, you go into the rankings and you get into some of the fun stuff like who has the best resource cities and whatnot. Nobody's really doing it yet on this world, but you'll find that your top resource production cities, if I wanted to be number one on this, all I'd have to do is build a food city, basically. Maximize my food production, and I think I'd be well above the number one here. So anyway, not that that's that important, but just FYI for future reference. So again, as far as farms go, just like the production buildings, the farm is the production building. The tier 1 booster is the empty spaces next to it in this case, and or cottages. Cottages are kind of a waste to use on farms, but technically they also do boost the same 30%. And then your mills and your lakes, not seawater, but lakes, these little single tile lakes, will boost farm production as a tier 2 super booster. So basic farm strategy is to position, basically you want to work with the lakes. The lakes are your hardcore natural resources. Depending on the layout and the approach of the city, it's not as important to always have a mill touching. If there's two, you typically want to have a mill in place, but I'll very often, like I'll just have like one more city slot, and the easiest thing to do is to just drop a single farm next to one, or ideally touching 2 lakes with no super booster. So I would say super boosters for a farm is extremely important, but not as virtually critical as it is for the others. Touching water again is always the ideal. That's a natural resource. As you can see here, I've got that iron mine queued to be destroyed. Ultimately, I would destroy that iron mine because that increases the bonus to these two buildings. So again, the first empty field that a farm touches is giving a 50% tier 1 bonus. Each additional empty field that it touches gives a 40%, and if it were to touch a cottage, which occasionally I'll do if it positions with other buildings, that'll give you a 30% bonus from that cottage. So in this case, I've just done a nice little four-way cluster, mill in the middle, maximizing these waterways and so on. So that's the basics of food production. Now, I'm going to cover more strategy in a different video, but just a quick rule of thought for both food and, or rule of thumb, I guess, for food and gold. I tend to try to use that as my fill in my basic resource cities. Most of my earlier resource cities are going to be focused on wood and stone and iron in whatever proportions the natural resources dictate, as well as my needs. And typically I'm trying to get some food production. You're getting natural storage in every city that it's kind of a waste not to at least capitalize on a little bit. So typically I'll use my food and gold production as a fill. And in fact, I'll wait till I get to gold to cover the other little piece of that. So anyway, there's the basic food. I'm going to jump over to the other city that I've got kind of a little example of gold. Now gold, I hear people talk about building gold cities. Now, a gold city is ultimately sometimes necessary. It may end up being necessary in this empire. It was in my last. But it is typically the most bang for your buck in terms of production per building will come from capitalizing on your harbors in every watered city. Any non-military watered city, that is, that you don't need the shipyards. So the harbors are actually the best boost. You're getting a 75% booster, super booster from the harbor, where the markets are only giving you I think at cap it's 20%, 16% now. I'm pretty sure it's 20%. So what that means is that really your best bang for your buck is always going to be townhouses, which for gold is your base production building, touching harbors primarily. And markets, typically, now if I were to build a gold city, I have actually a pattern where you destroy all the resources and you lay out a grid of sandwich of markets and townhouses. But like I said, this harbor space for gold production, this harbor space in all of your resource cities is kind of like prime real estate. And it's a shame to not capitalize on that as you go, and then later have to build an entire less efficient gold city to compensate for a lack of capitalizing on gold production just off of the natural harbors that you have. Again, the most bang for your buck you're going to get in gold production is here. As far as the mechanics, it's pretty simple. Again, this townhouse, it's touching 2 harbors, it's touching 2 markets, so it's getting a tier 1 boost from the markets, it's getting a tier 2 boost from the harbors, and overall the same mechanics are there. So that is the basics of gold and farm production. Some of that might only make sense if you watch that first video that covers wood, stone, and iron. Thanks for watching, and I'll do some more in the near future.